we are discussing the low interest of Igbo youths on army recruitment. And to do justice to this, we have someone in the studio. He is Dr. Malaki Chuma Ochie. He is the head of Department of International Relations. He is the acting dean, School of Business and Social Sciences from the Madoka University at Ekwegbe, Nsukka. He is also former immediate past secretary Ohaneze Igbo, Enugu State. He's a man wearing so many hats. Good morning to you, Doctor, and thank you for joining us today in this program.
Good morning and welcome, listeners.
All right. You did listen in a little bit, to the last conversation that we had where Senator Okezia was, stating his concerns about insecurity in Enugu State particularly. And before we went on air, you were telling me some things about one of the reasons why there's obvious, non-interest of Igbo youths, in army recruitments in Nigeria. Could you take us through a historical perspective as to why this paradigm still subsists? Why Igbo youths are not interested in army recruitment? Are they being, excluded, or they just don't want to be part of it?
Thank you very much. And yes, I listened into Senator Kezia, and his concerns are genuine. Not just Enugu State, but the entire Igbo political space appears to have become a vassal state, a conquered territory, where insecurity has become a way of life. He just mentioned areas that came to his mind, but I can tell you that the entire Enugu State is in serious trouble. And we can also link this to one of the reasons why the Igbo youths feel very reluctant in joining the Nigerian army. We shall come to that.
Okay.
But basically, you have to look at the Nigerian army, its historical evolution, and how it has transited to today. I recall that what turned out to be known as the Nigerian Army started in 1863 when Lieutenant John Glover, after they conquered, the British conquered Lagos, he formed what you may call a constabulary, called it Glover Hausa Army. These things are recorded in art history, and they are there in the archives. It was this Glover Hausa Constabulary that was integrated into the Royal West African Frontier Force. In 1960, when Nigeria gained independence, the Royal West African Frontier Force was adopted as the Nigerian Army.
As of 1960?
As of 1960, after independence. So it was at that point that most Igbos also began to join the Nigerian Army as a national institution. But basically, the Nigerian Army, from the point of its establishment, was skewed as a sectional army. Glover had no reason to call that constabulary Hausa Constabulary in way down Lagos. Now, what has happened is that the army has assumed the character of its creators. And you have to understand that the Nigerian army, its conduct and the way it has responded to issues in Nigeria, either political, economic, or sociocultural, has also been determined by the character of the Nigerian state. And what is the character of the Nigerian state? The Nigerian state is a rentier economy. It is a new colonial state. It is a state with high level of extractive institutions. It is a state that has weak institutions. The army or even the police or other security agencies were created not to respond to the needs of the people, but to protect the elite in power. So from the point of its formation, not just the Nigerian army, but also the Nigerian police became atavistic, anti-people, and willing to be deployed in the hands of the political elite to crush any dissent from the people. So it's always been alienated from the people. If this historical background is anything to go by, then we can say that there are so many reasons why, for instance, the Igbo youths are reluctant in joining the Nigerian army. And this can also be linked to the historical evolution of the Nigerian army as an institution. In 1966, the Nigerian army organized a coup, supposedly led by Chukwuma Kaduna Nzogu. And
it was called an Igbo coup.
We shall come to that,
okay,
to know whether it's an Igbo coup or not. Now that coup was mischievously interpreted as an Igbo coup. And it was David Moffett, one of the colonial undersecretaries in the colonial office then, who was also an instructor at Ahmadu Bello University, who called the Hausa intelligentsias to call them to say, you are here and the Igbos have taken over. If you read Ikejani and Ikejani, their book on Desiderata for Nationhood, David Paddington was quoted. David Paddington was the correspondent of the London Times in Bauchi at that time. He was quoted as saying that in a nocturnal meeting held in Sokoto on that night, that the British High Commission was telling the Hausas, was in a telegram to London, saying, the people we handed over power have been overthrown by the ambitious Igbos. And we need to return the power to them. Evidences abound that within that period, once the coup was announced, it was nationally accepted. The sketch, which is fundamentally the mouthpiece of the North, in its editorial on 16th February of 1960, praised the coup. The same with Tribune, the same with Daily Times, the same with West African Pilot, and all other top media outlets in those days. But within 24 hours, the perception in the North about the coup changed, because the Hausa broadcasting, the BBC Hausa service had said that this was an Igbo coup. That why was Awolowo not killed? Why was Zik not killed? Why was it that it's only Ahmadu Bello that was killed? These divisive narratives turned that coup, which was supposed to be a revolution, it skewed it into an Igbo coup, and that sparked the Araba riots and the pogrom, choreographed pogrom against the Igbos living in the north. There are evidences. During the Oputa panel, I conducted the research for human rights violations against Igbo from 1960 to 1999. And we produced 2 volumes which we submitted and defended at the Oputa panel. And we produced evidences to show that Igbo women who were running into police stations for protection, pregnant as they were mowed down and their stomachs ripped open and the fetus cut into pieces like onions. These things are recorded in history. Now, that war and what that coup and the war that came with it, at the end of it in 1970, there was a policy of reintegration, rehabilitation, and reconciliation. But there was an unwritten law, albeit that the Igbos can never go across certain levels in the Nigerian army. And remember that in the West, when that coup was announced, there was what they call Operation Wetie. What is Operation Wetie? Operation Wetie is the Yoruba version of the pogrom in the north. That is, you wet your victim with fuel and set him on fire. So that is Wetie. Wet him. W-E-T, wet him with fuel and set him ablaze. So the Igbos ran home because that was the only place they could run to, their homeland. And thus came the war. So after the war, the issues that resonated was, who are the Igbos? Are you tolerated or accommodated in Nigeria? So today, these things have been passed down. It's 50-something years now after the Nigerian Civil War. Yet, these narratives are as fresh as they happened yesterday or this morning. So the Igbo youths feel that they have no career path in the Nigerian military, that they are only being tolerated, not accommodated in Nigeria. The Igbos feel they are marginalized and alienated from the power points in this country. When you look at the political and economic and social structures in Nigeria, you can but agree that the Igbo youths have all the justifications to say, I am not going to enlist in the Nigerian army. If you look at the political structure of Nigeria, the Igbos have been sequestered into 5 states, not minding that the Igbos constitute the largest single population south of the Sahara. In 1998, the DFID, did an area survey of population density in what they call Lower Nile, Nigeria belonging to that. And in Nigeria, they discovered that where you have the highest population density in Nigeria was in Mbise, with a population density of 1,287 or thereabout per square kilometer. The only place that rivaled that place was Lagos because of its cosmopolitan nature. The another place that came near was the Sabongeri area of Kano, where the Igbos were. The Igbos, without sounding immodest, are in excess of 100 million people. I can tell you that.
Currently in Nigeria.
Currently, or even more than that. If the Igbos within the African sub-region and even in other parts of Nigeria were to come home and settle, there will be no place for them to settle. The Igbos constitute the single largest ethnic group in Nigeria because even by the manipulated census, pre-independent census, the Igbos were the most populous. But if you go to the census figures today in Nigeria, the Igbos have been steadily decreasing, not even by projection. So there is a kind of conspiracy to demographically underpopulate the Igbo political space. The Igbos are the only people who take census outside Igbo homeland. They don't come home to be counted. They are counted where they are. Now, with all this, the Igbos are sequestered in five states. The South, or where you call the minorities, they have 6 states. The West, they have 6 states. Where you have the North Central, they have 6 states. The Northeast has 7 states. The Northwest have 6 states. Only the Igbo space has 5 states. Come to local governments. The entire Igbo space has 97 local governments. 3 states in the Northwest neutralizes our states. Katsina State has about 41 local governments. So by the time you add 2-3 states in the north, core north, the Igbos are nowhere to be found. Look at the House of Representatives. We are the least. Look at the Senate. Out of 109 senators, we have 15 senators. Whereas a particular zone in this country has 21 senators. All these things put together, the Igbo youth feels we are not part of this country called Nigeria. We're only being tolerated. And that is why most of them, as a matter of fact, 90% of Igbo youths are either latently or outwardly sympathetic to the vibes of IPOB or MASOB. This mindset of we want out, we want Biafra, and so on. I've told my friends, Biafra remains a huge question mark on the sentences of our pretensions as a state in Nigeria, as a United States in Nigeria. There is, as far as Biafra is a momentum, Biafra is not just Igbos. Biafra can happen anywhere. OPC is Biafra. Ariwa is Biafra.
It's the spirit of
It's the spirit. We are not united. It's just that we have named our own Biafra. So for the Igbo youth, particularly, joining the Nigerian army amounts to joining the oppressor
to oppress you.
To oppress the people,
Okay.
and so on. And what is even more, our people, even in their homeland, you cannot travel from Enugu here to Aba without encountering over 57 roadblocks. Consider a commuter bus distributing to 200 naira per roadblock. Times it by 51. That is, recently, I think one of these non-government, I'll remember the name, non-governmental organizations.
Would that be syrup?
No, it's not syrup. It's not syrup.
Okay.
Jäger, I think something like that. Jäger did a survey and came out with a mind-boggling report that in the entire Southeast, what security operatives extract from the people within a year is in the excess of 40 billion naira. Even as a private citizen who drives on the road, I have experienced that, for instance, Ezia talked about Ugbogo Opi Road. From Ibagwa, immediately after Ibagwa, or to where you call Amambakanike, then from that place to Opi Junction, you have 18 police posts. And they extort money from motorists. motorcyclists, and so on. It's here, in Igbo land here, that the police or the army sees a young man and say, your phone, what's the password to your phone? You must be a 419. So we have become a vassal state, a conquered people, and our people are so disillusioned, and our people feel, especially our youths, that they should not join the army because it is an institution designed historically to oppress them.
All right, you did mention something that I actually want to go back to, and I want you to throw more light on it. You said that the army has finally assumed the script of some sort of its creators.
Yes.
And you also said that that the Nigerian army, you know, the way it has turned out to be, is anti-Igbo. I'm not quoting you now, but it seems as though this is what you're trying to say. Now, I want to draw an analogy just to, you know, buttress my point. You know, usually when there is a particular outcome in a family or in a community, and it persists, people will say, you go ask questions. There's probably an altar or a saying, a declaration that is fueling that outcome. Now we know that in Nigeria, in Africa generally, history tends to be forgotten. Sometimes we forget. You hear people say you've forgotten where you're coming from. But this one persists, which was why you said that Nigerian army has assumed, you know, the mode of its creators. What has kept this propaganda? What has kept this particular outcome going, regardless of the years of post-Civil War, you know, the years after which the British left? What has kept this? Because you said it's a non-written law. What is it that is fueling this outcome?
Okay. Let me say, Nigeria and her leaders, as well as other African countries, they are suffering from what one may call the disease of amnesia. Amnesia is where you are so forgetful and you tend to hear what you want to hear or see what you want to see. That is one of our problems. As to why it has persisted, even when we know that this is wrong, is because Nigeria is a new colonial state. New colonialism, which Kwame Osagiefo Nkrumah, in his book, The New Imperialism, The Last Vestiges of Colonialism, he talked about the Western metropoles sustaining atavistic leadership in African countries, where they can use their proxies, their poltages, to control the economy of the emerging states and then subjugate the people. It is the pressure, or rather the how do we describe it now? But it's just that colonial, neo-colonial interest in the resources of Nigeria to grow the economy of the West that has sustained this kind of imperialism, this kind of this thing. And that is why colonialism in Nigeria did not come to develop Nigeria. It didn't come to develop any African state. If you read the biography of Lord Lugard, he said that Africa was God's gifts to Europe. And that yes, and that it was there for Europe, especially Britain, to exploit to its fullest potential. They never came to develop us. Another reading of Chinua Achebe's book, Things Fall Apart, will tell you what informed the theme, things fall apart. So they know that a truly independent Africa, a truly independent Nigerian state will compete with them at the international arena. So it is in their own interest to keep Nigeria glued together, irrespective of the feelings of the people. The army is a creation of colonialism. That colonial creation disarticulates our social organization, our cultural organization. Yeah. It is not to our own advantage. Our leaders know. Our leaders know. Why would the army get involved in election matters, for instance? For instance, today, if they want to do election, they will go and talk with the GOC. The GOC will release military guys, boys to the person in power. And they will say, we are keeping watch, and so on. So the army, the police, and all these people, they are fulfilling their mandate as protectors of the powers that be and not of the people. That is why. It's not that our leaders do not know what to do. They know what to do. But if they do it, they will be eliminated. And there are historical parallels to what I'm telling you. Patrice Lumumba was eliminated by Belgium in Congo Democratic Republic. And that is one of the most endowed countries in Africa, the richest countries in Africa. Kwame Nkrumah was eliminated. Modibo Keita was eliminated just because they saw that there was need for Africa to be truly independent. And as soon as the West saw that these are people who can actually drive the African, Nigerian Renaissance, there was need to eliminate them. That's why Patrice Lumumba, they eliminated him. In Ghana here, they eliminated him. In Côte d'Ivoire, they eliminated Sylvanus Olympio. Okay? In Niger, they eliminated, I remember his name. Right. But it's like that everywhere. The same in Nigeria here. Right. They cannot allow such things to do. That is why also the Igbos, without sounding immodest, the Igbos, yes, they may be fiercely individualistic, but they are very creative. They want to test the untested waters. This is one character that international colonialism or neocolonialism does not want. People who ask questions.
Yes, Doc, I was going to ask, do you think what is obtainable in the military as per the disenfranchisement of the Igbo youth, it has, spilled over to the political space, maybe not the business, but then the political space? You think the same thing is happening there?
It's happening.
And it's being filled by foreign actors.
Yes.
What is the way forward?
Well, the way forward, one, Nigeria leaders must agree we need to create a Nigeria that will be our country. Somebody was saying sometime that Harvard University is the best university to study law. And I said, what law? Igbo law? Yoruba law? It's good. It's the best in studying their own law, not ours. Until we begin to tell ourselves we need to create a Nigeria where succeeding generations will say, this is our country, and there will be no this Japa syndrome. Yes. That's number one. Number two, we need, in line with that number one, we need to restructure Nigeria. Unpack this bundle called Nigeria.
That is a whole big kettle of fish.
Yes,
for another day.
We need to unpack it.
Yes.
We need to unpack it. Then there is need, for instance, for trust building, confidence building, the army should reach out to the Igbos, Igbo youths. This idea of enlisting Fulanis and Hausas through the back door, if just
through the back door, you mean?
Through the back door. Let me tell you one which is true. The army knows it. Once a group of boys in the north who were Boko Haram before, they will tell you we have repented. Repentant Boko Haram or ISWAP fighters. And so on. They say we have surrendered. And the army will go ahead to say we are rehabilitating them. And since they have knowledge of use of gun, let them go into the army. How many IPOB members have been captured and integrated into the Nigerian army? So for them, the Nigerian army is a sectional army. But I urge Nigerian Igbo youth, you cannot run away from it.
Yes.
Because we are Nigerians, and you can't solve a problem from a point marginal to that problem. So I urge them, I encourage them, if you're within the age of enlistment, please be enlisted. Who knows?
Definitely.
Yes. Because you can, tomorrow an Igbo man may become the president. And if you are not, it doesn't have people in the army and so on, it will be difficult.
All right, Dr. Malaki Chuma Oche, thank you so much for your time and your insights.
Thank you very much.